I grew up in the countryside. My parents still live out there. I don't mean nearby the woods or anything. I mean besides a few houses, there's nothing but the mountains and rice fields. Nothing really changes in my hometown. To this day, everything looks how it did when I was young. At night, you wouldn't be able to see your own hand in front of your face. I mean that it's not as well lit as a suburban city. I love it though. I have so many great memories of my rural town and my family home. After I graduated from high school, I got a place at a university in a big city. I would often travel back and forth from the city to my hometown. Of course, I was worried about living in the city after coming from the countryside, but with the support of my family and the new friends I had made, I felt I was doing well. Before I knew it, it was summer vacation, so I decided to go back home. I was in really high spirits because I loved my first steps into adulthood. It was 11 at night when I arrived at the closest station. I knew it would take about 40 minutes to get to my parents' home on foot. I thought about calling them and asking them for a ride. I wish I did now, but that's hindsight for you. No, I wanted to walk home. I guess I didn't want to be seen as a kid anymore. I knew the road was straight without many hills, and it was a dry night, so I thought, why not get some exercise? On the road home, the street lights were few and far between, and there weren't many cars on the street. The road wasn't wide, and it was very dark. I had to pass through many spooky places like the cemetery and through dark tunnels. My high spirits had dwindled away. I was getting really freaked out. I didn't want to call my parents for a ride though. How embarrassing would that be? No, I would have to push on and keep moving. The following takes place when I was about 10 minutes away from my home. I could hear the crickets in the rice field either side, chirping away. There were no streetlights, and the night was eerily still. Then something broke the silence. A terrible groaning sound. I hoped it was just my imagination, and I tried to up my walking pace. Then I heard it again. I knew it was coming from the rice field. I knew that deer and wild boar lived in the area. I hoped it was some kind of beast, but it sounded undeniably human. I took another step forward, and then the voice groaned louder. At this point in the movies, they stop in their tracks or scream, but in my case, I just bolted. It was really frightening. It seemed to get louder as I ran. I kept my head down until I got to my parents' house. I got away safely, and I was greeted by my parents, who had laid on a late dinner for me. The relief of being back home and seeing them again really laid my fears to rest. I didn't want to ruin the vibe, so I didn't tell them about the creepy incident on the way home. I thought I'd just tell them tomorrow. The next day I was awoken by sirens early in the morning. And at about lunchtime, I checked our local news site and found the following. The search for the missing senior citizen was brought to a close this morning. I didn't know what that was about, so I asked my parents what had happened and if we knew the missing woman. Turns out we did know her. I knew her. She was a lovely lady. Unfortunately, she had developed dementia. I was very surprised to hear that she was missing. The most surprising piece of news was the fact that her body was discovered in a rice field about 10 minutes away from my parents' house. This means that the moaning I had heard that night was probably her final pleas for help. I haven't told anyone about this, not even my parents. To be honest, the guilt eats at me. I'm tortured by recurring dreams about that night. I want to keep this as short as possible, as it's very personal. My husband died when he was quite young. We both knew that it was coming, as he had developed a serious illness a few years back. His illness meant that he lost his ability to drive. At the time he lost his license, I didn't have one myself. I knew that driving was a big part of his life. He loved it. So I applied for my license, and everything was going well. I passed the practical test, but I failed the written test. I'm such a dumbass. It broke my heart that I had failed, because I wanted to do so much for him. I was so disappointed on the day I got the test results. I wanted to pass so badly. I wanted to help. I felt so stupid. I thought that he would be just as disappointed as I was, but he wasn't. He comforted me. He was such a great husband. Come on, don't be down. You were so close. Listen, imagine I'm right behind you. I know you can do it. I took a second test, and I failed again. I can't tell you how disappointed I was. Maybe I was feeling the pressure of what it meant, or I had too much going on. I know these are just nothing but excuses. Eventually, his condition worsened, and unfortunately, he passed away. I guessed that I didn't need to take the test anymore, but I felt like I should. I felt like I should try, like there was someone cheering me on. So test day arrived again, and as usual, I rode my bike to the test center. The bike I had these funky mirrors attached to the handlebars. I realized now that I had become a very cautious person. Safety was really important to me back then, and I guess you can understand why. I checked the mirrors regularly. There was no one behind me as I rode down the street. I then took another look in the mirror, and suddenly there was someone stood in the road behind me. It looked like they were waving. Was that you? Were you right behind me like you promised? I passed the test, by the way. I remember that it was a sunny day. I rode my bike to the place that I met my husband, and I stayed there a long time. So grateful. I'm so grateful for everything. Thank you. I want to tell you a couple stories about when I used to live on the streets as a homeless man. It was hell living on the streets. The stares and the looks of disgust were nothing compared to the violence I endured. I got into an altercation with some guys one night in a park in Tokyo, and I was beaten to within an inch of my life. I had to get out of the area, as I thought they would be back. I remember moving from place to place, and it was all kind of a blur. Somehow, I ended up way up in the sticks, close to the mountains, and eventually I ended up living in an abandoned shrine. It wasn't so bad. I would walk down to the village and exchange my labor for food. You might think that living in an abandoned shrine might be scary, but I can tell you that there was only one thing I was scared of: people. I would offer my services to anyone who had any work available. I like to think of myself as a jack of all trades, an all-rounder. I would often ask people on the street or go door to door trying to drum up some work. One guy asked me what services I could offer. Pretty much anything, I said. He then pulled a gun out, cocked the trigger, and put it against my head. "It's loaded," he said. You can imagine how I felt, right? He put the gun away and said, "I just wanted to point a loaded gun at a human." He then threw some money my way and left. I guess the cash he threw was what he deemed the value of my life to be. Not long after that, a gang found out where I had been living. They came late one night. They found me, and one said a phrase so off-putting, I don't think I'll ever forget it. "You have no human rights." He had already dehumanized me. They carried sticks, iron bars, metal pipes. and they came at me. It was too late to escape, and when they were through, I was left with a broken leg. It was hell. At the same time I experienced such a lack of humanity, I also experienced the opposite. A farmer I had worked for in the village brought food to me when he heard about the gang attack, and he even paid for my hospital bills. If it wasn't for him checking on me, I probably wouldn't have been found, and I might have starved to death in my makeshift home. There would have been no way for me to get down that mountain to the village with a broken leg. I owed that man my life, and I asked if there was any way I could repay him, and he just replied, "Oh hell, why don't you just try and grow some vegetables or something, make yourself a living. Pay me back when you get yourself set up. There's no rush." I learned a lot about agricultural work from him, and when he gave me a method to repay his generosity, I felt like I was still getting more than I was giving. The soil by the shrine was hard, and nothing much would grow, but I was determined to pay him back. I would go to the river countless times a day to fetch water, and eventually I made some serious progress. This joy was short-lived. A group of people who were into urban exploration came to the abandoned shrine and trashed my little farm. They stomped all over my plans. Why? I had nothing, yet people still wanted to take from me. Something snapped in me. I felt robbed, and I wanted someone to pay for it. I kept a 2x4 with me at all times, and I decided I would be ready for whoever wanted to mess with me. Living this way made me happy. Fight or flight, a return to animal instincts. I grew less trustworthy. I was always scared of spirits or ghosts, but I learned humans are much worse. It was at this point I started to see things. I thought the shrine was haunted. I decided if there was something else there with me in the shrine, I wanted to be of service to the shrine, since the farm wasn't working out. I had learned some carpentry skills when I was younger, and I thought I would try and clean the place up and mend some things. Maybe if the shrine looked a bit more maintained, it would keep the urban explorers and gangs away. Being busy took my mind off my hate for those who sought to hurt me. I started to speak to God, or whatever the spirits that inhabited the shrine were. I would say hello and goodbye, like I was living with them. At first just to myself, and then quietly out loud. And by the end, I was talking loudly like there was someone else with me. Eventually, the shrine looked pretty good. I started to see the ghost again. She was a beautiful woman, and she was so pleased that I had cleaned up the shrine. She would just sit there and comb her gorgeous hair. Sometimes I wouldn't even hear her. I would just hear some rummaging noises. I felt like I had some company, and I enjoyed it. The gang came back one night. The same gang that attacked me and broke my leg. They laughed at me when I called for help, when I called to her. But they weren't laughing when my friend who owned the farm arrived with his hunting rifle. They never came back after that. Since he saved me again, I decided to stop being so hateful. And I put all that wasted energy into agriculture. I still needed to pay him back, even though he wasn't expecting anything from me. I was determined, and through years of hard work, dedication, and the support of my friend, I managed to hone my skills. I found some land to rent, used it, did well, and I kept repeating this process. Now I own several plots, and I have several employees. I usually offer work to those who are in the same position as me, the homeless. And as for my friend, I've paid him back, don't worry. I bought him several plots of land by the mountains. Finding a partner hasn't really worked out for me, but whenever I am down, I seem to dream about the spirit of the woman in the shrine. Sometimes I think I was rescued by someone other than just my farm friend. So my next project is restoring the shrine to its former glory and reinstating a priest there. I bought a cheap car recently. It only had one previous owner. It was a great deal, and the fact that it came with a top-of-the-range satellite navigation system was the icing on the cake. I was over the moon. I went to pick up the car and decided to go for a little drive. I was playing around with the controls and found a location which the previous owner must have keyed in. I thought there might be other locations, but there was just the one saved in the system. The location was pretty close to my home, and I was in a curious kind of mood, so I decided to follow the route. I was driving around for about half an hour, and I realized I was getting closer and closer to my destination. The only thing was, I was being directed to a mountain road. There was literally nothing around. Why would this be a pinned location, I wondered. The road narrowed, and I was getting a little worried. I was thinking of turning back, but I was so close to the destination. I mean, I hadn't come all this way just to turn back. "You have arrived at your destination," the robotic voice of the sat-nav alerted me. There wasn't anything there. I was a little disappointed. So I decided to get out of the car to look around a little. Then I spotted something. A bunch of withered chrysanthemums were propped up by the side of the road. Next to them appeared to be some burned incense sticks. I started to get a bit freaked out. It just didn't feel right, so I hurried back to the safety of my car. I had just sat in the driving seat and started the ignition when the radio roared to life. I heard something very audible. This is what I heard. "Me. It was here. It was no accident." Shivers ran up my spine. I had to get out of there. I have been thinking about that moment for years, and how all the things that led up to it just seemed beyond a coincidence. That phrase, "no accident," coupled with the flowers and the incense, really stuck with me. I looked up the area for any hit and runs or roadside accidents, deaths or something, but it came up empty. Which leaves me thinking that something happened there which might not have been to do with a car accident. It was ominous that there was only one bunch of withered flowers. What if someone who knew something more about what had happened is the person placing the flowers there? I wish I could find out more. I wish there was something else to go by, but there isn't. Sometimes I drive out there and wait to see if someone will lay flowers at the spot. So far, nothing. Maybe I'm just overthinking it, but I wanted to share this story.